A man sits quietly on the edge of his hotel bed, staring at nothing. The room is still, but inside him, something churns. He didn't take the job. He didn't say "I love you" when it mattered. And now the moment is gonna no fix, no do-over. But his body doesn't seem to know that. His stomach clenches with a dull ache. His hands feel cold. His heart rate slows, but his chest feels tight. A quiet flood of cortisol begins to move through his bloodstream. It's as if some invisible alarm has been tripped, as if the body believes a threat is still present. But there's no danger here, only memory, only regret. And yet it lands with the weight of something real, tangible, physical, not just a passing thought, but a biochemical reaction. This moment invites a deeper question. Why do our bodies physically respond to mistakes we can no longer change? Why does regret, a purely mental act of looking backward, trigger such a visceral response in the present? Is it simply an emotional byproduct, a psychological ghost, or is it something more ancient, more adaptive? Could regret be a biological mechanism? Survival reflex, meant not to punish us, but to teach us, to help us remember, to help us choose differently next time. What if regret isn't failure at all, but feedback delivered, not in logic, but in sensation? Neuroscience suggests that regret lights up the same neural circuits as physical pain. The same pathways that warn us not to touch fire or fall from heights are activated when we realize we've made the wrong choice. It's as if the brain uses pain, emotional or physical, as a teaching tool, burning the lesson into memory. Dopamine, our reward chemical, doesn't just spike with joy. It also plummets with loss. And in that dip, something is encoded. This is the heart of the mystery. What if regret is not a weakness, not a flaw, but a deeply intelligent system of internal learning? A chemical language that helps us map right from wrong, growth from loss, wisdom from pain. Perhaps regret doesn't arise to haunt us, but to evolve us. Not to remind us what we missed, but to shape who we become. Regret is often framed as a feeling, a gnawing ache in the chest, a thought loop we can't escape. But beneath its emotional weight lies a precise biochemical dance. At the core is dopamine, the brain's molecule of anticipation and reward prediction. Dopamine doesn't just make us feel good when things go right. It also plummets when outcomes fall short of expectations. This dip, known as a reward prediction error, is what gives regret its sharp edge. It's the brain recalibrating, asking, why didn't that work out? Then comes cortisol, the hormone of stress, flooding the body in response to perceived failure or threat. Serotonin weaves through the process as well, modulating mood, social perception, and in the emotional aftermath, the brain releases endogenous opioids, its built-in painkillers, to buffer the emotional sting, the same way it might after a physical injury. In this way, regret isn't just thought, it's chemistry, a full body signal that something meaningful has been lost or misjudged. Neuroscience maps this experience with astonishing clarity. Functional MRI studies show that regret activates the orbitofrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex regions responsible for evaluating choices and monitoring outcomes. These areas don't just assess what happened, they simulate what could have happened. They compare reality's actual and imagined, and the difference becomes emotional fuel. What's fascinating is that these brain regions also light up in response to physical pain, suggesting that regret is not metaphorically painful, it is neurologically processed as pain. This means our brains treat emotional mistakes with the same seriousness as bodily harm, reinforcing the lesson through discomfort. This connection isn't a new idea. As early as the 1950s, behavioral psychologist B.F. Skinner observed that the anticipation of regret influences decision-making. Rats would avoid choices that had previously led to loss, even in novel contexts. The implication was profound. Regret doesn't just shape how we feel after something goes wrong, it rewires how we act before something happens again. It becomes a form of predictive learning, a biological alarm system that warns, don't go down that path again. In the modern world, regret operates constantly, sometimes invisibly. It shapes how we swipe through dating profiles, how we invest money, how we avoid vulnerability, how we choose careers. In a post-pandemic landscape, it has taken on new forms. Regret over lost time, missed final conversations with loved ones, choices made in fear that now feel irreversible. It seeps into mental health, contributing to rumination, obsessive self-blame, and trauma loops. It becomes pathological when the lesson becomes a prison, when reflection curdles into shame. So, the question becomes, what's regret really doing to us? Is it a teacher guiding us toward wiser futures? Or is it a weight silently grinding down our health and happiness? Neuroscience doesn't offer a simple answer, but it does suggest this: regret is not just suffering, it's a signal, and whether it makes us wiser or sick may depend on whether we learn to listen to it or get lost inside it. In 2004, neuroscientist Benedetto De Martino conducted a study that reshaped how we understand regret. Using a combination of gambling tasks and fMRI imaging, he discovered something surprising. Regret isn't triggered simply by loss. It's not about what did happen, it's about what could have happened instead. Participants didn't feel the most distress when they lost money. They felt the most regret when they realized a better choice had been possible, when the missed outcome was close enough to imagine vividly. Their brains lit up, not in response to the result itself, but in response to a story their minds constructed about what might have been. And critically, those who felt regret were more cautious and thoughtful in later decisions. Regret made them wiser, more attuned. It nudged them toward better outcomes. But this insight brought a deeper dilemma to the surface. If regret is so functionally, it sharpens our thinking and protects us from repeating mistakes, then why does it so often become crippling? Why does it spiral into shame, anxiety, paralysis? Why do some people emerge from regret empowered, while others sink into emotional loops they can't escape? The answer lies in the paradox of regret itself. Regret is unique among emotions because it requires a very specific sequence, a choice, a consequence, and most importantly, an imagination of a better path. Without imagination, there's no regret, just disappointment or sadness. But because humans can simulate alternate realities, our regrets take on a haunting quality. They are not just reactions, they are mental replays, endless edits of the past, directed by a brain that insists on fixing what can't be fixed. In this way, regret is the emotional cost of consciousness. It's the tax we pay for foresight. And simulation, it's the flip side of wisdom. But what happens when this simulation never stops? When the brain loops again and again on a moment that's already gone? What happens when we replay the missed goodbye, the wrong decision, the silence where a truth should have been spoken? Regret, which began as a tool, becomes a trap. The same neural machinery that allows us to learn and grow begins to suffocate us with what we become prisoners, not of the past itself, but of the version of the past we keep reimagining. This is the hidden cost of regret, not just the pain of what happened, but the torment of what could have happened and never will. Regret is built on the premise of freedom, the belief that you could have chosen otherwise. It's a feeling rooted not just in what went wrong, but in the conviction that you were the one who made it go wrong. This is what gives regret its sharp, personal edge, the sense of agency, of responsibility, of missed potential. But this raises a deep and unsettling question. If neuroscience increasingly shows that many of our decisions are shaped by unconscious processes, habits, upbringing, brain chemistry, then what does it mean to say we chose anything at all? Can you truly regret an action if your brain was never fully free in the first place? This is the philosophical tension at the heart of regret. We feel it as a judgment on our agency, but our biology suggests our agency may be far more limited than we imagine. History is filled with haunting expressions of regret that reflect this tension. Charles Darwin, in a letter written late in life, confessed that he sometimes regretted turning to natural history at all, despite revolutionizing science. He worried about the spiritual cost. Robert Oppenheimer, after witnessing the first atomic bomb explode, quoted the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." The brilliance of his contribution was eclipsed by the weight of its consequences. Even Edith Piaf, who sang Nan, Genie, Regret Reen, I regret nothing, touched a cultural nerve, because the very act of declaring no regret is itself a response to it, and studies show that even those who claim to have no regrets often carry deep, quiet ones beneath the surface. We regret even as we deny it. Socially and psychologically, regret behaves in complex ways. It increases with age, as the pool of unrealized possibilities grows. It increases with education, as the imagination becomes sharper at simulating other outcomes. And it increases with self-awareness, as introspection deepens. On the other hand, regret diminishes when people attribute failure to forces outside themselves, circumstance, luck, the actions of others. But it spikes when people see themselves as solely responsible. Notably, moral regret over harming others activates deeper and more sustained neural circuits than personal or strategic failure. We carry those regrets longer, and they're harder to soothe. It suggests that the social dimension of regret, our relationship to others, is more powerful than the solitary one. In the modern world, regret has woven itself into nearly every domain of life. It fuels perfectionism, the need to make the perfect choice to avoid future sorrow. It drives decision paralysis, as people fear committing to a path that may someday haunt them. It feeds consumer guilt, when every purchase becomes a reflection of identity and opportunity cost. It even influences political behavior, as some radical movements gain traction among those seeking to rewrite or avenge the past. And in the age of social media, regret takes on a new, insidious form. Counterfactual exposure. Every scroll shows you the life you didn't choose, the wedding you didn't have, the job you didn't get, the version of yourself you didn't become. And so, even in a moment of peace, regret can be reignited, pulled from the archives of the mind by the endless mirror of others. Curated lives, regret is no longer confined to memory. It's woven into culture, into screens, into the very way we relate to time. And as the number of choices we face multiplies, so does the space for imagining we got it wrong. At its biological core, regret isn't just a feeling, it's a learning mechanism, a neural algorithm fine-tuned over millennia to help us make better choices. It works through dopamine prediction errors, the brain constantly generates expectations, and when reality doesn't meet those expectations, it flags the discrepancy. This gap between what we hoped for and what we got is where regret lives. It's not random. It's not moral failure. It's a precise, adaptive system designed to teach the organism what not to do next time. But here's where the twist shatters the common narrative. You can regret something even when you made the right choice. Studies show that people often feel regret after making optimal decisions, not because the outcome was bad, but because they can imagine a better one. The mere existence of a counterfactual love, a reality that seemed slightly more rewarding, is enough to activate the neural circuitry of regret. The brain isn't judging the logic of the past. It's simulating how to better predict the future. This insight flips our understanding on its head. Regret isn't actually about the past. It feels like reflection, but it's really a forecast-on emotional simulation engine, trying to refine the internal model of the world. The pain isn't meant to trap us. It's meant to train us. But this system comes with a cost. When regret becomes chronic, when it loops without resolution, it begins to reshape the brain itself. Prolonged activation of cortisol, the stress hormone, and repeated cycling through dopaminergic feedback loops can lead to measurable changes in the reward circuitry of the brain. Over time, this alters how we experience motivation, satisfaction, and emotional balance. The very system designed to help us improve can, in overdrive, spiral into depression, anxiety, insomnia, even paralysis. The regret becomes not a lesson, but a lens through which every new decision is filtered, doubted, feared. And here lies the painful irony. The more intelligent your brain is, the more vividly and flexibly it can simulate alternate outcomes, the more vulnerable you may be to regret. Imagination becomes a double-edged sword. It fuels creativity, empathy, and foresight. But it also generates a million lives you didn't live, a million roads not taken. And even if you made the best choice possible, even if all the data pointed the right way, your mind can still torture you with the image of a slightly better outcome. Regret, then, isn't always rational. It's not a moral reckoning. It's the cost of a mind built to imagine more than one future, and never being quite sure which one was best. Modern neuroscience now offers a reframing of regret not as a flaw, but as a function. The brain, it turns out, needs counterfactuals to grow. These imagined what-ifs are essential for developing cognitive flexibility, social accountability, and adaptive behavior. Regret is the emotional signature of this process. It arises when the brain detects a mismatch between expectation and outcome, and it uses that signal to update its internal model of the world. In fact, studies of individuals with orbitofrontal cortex damage reveal something startling. They no longer experience regret. And while that may sound like a relief, it comes at a steep cost. They also lose the ability to learn from their mistakes. They make the same poor choices again and again. Regret, then, is the emotional price of wisdom. A system that allows us to correct course, repair harm, and anticipate consequences more clearly. This understanding is giving rise to new therapeutic practices that don't aim to eliminate regret, but to metabolize it. One is counterfactual reframing, a cognitive shift from I should have to, now I know. This subtle change transforms regret from a judgment into a lesson. Instead of being stuck in the past, the brain begins to reorient toward the future. Another approach is self-compassion therapy, which has been shown to reduce the neural intensity of regret-related pain. By treating oneself with the same empathy offered to a friend, the brain's punishment circuits ease, allowing space for reflection without shame. Finally, effective forecasting training, which teaches people to more realistically predict how future outcomes will feel, can reduce the likelihood of regret spirals caused by unrealistic expectations. These methods don't erase regret, but they refine it into something useful, something transformative. On a deeper level, regret functions much like grief. If grief is a wound to attachment, regret is a wound to agency, the part of us that longs to believe we are in control of our lives. And like all wounds, regret doesn't mean something is broken beyond repair. It means something important happened. It marks the place where healing must begin. The pain is not arbitrary. It's directional. It points to values, to hopes, to relationships that mattered. And in doing so, it gives us a roadmap not to perfection, but to growth. That powerful truth that emerges is this: regret is not a weakness. It is a neural footprint of evolution in action. It is the echo of a brain that cares, a body that learns, and a mind that dares to imagine a better way forward. In that light, regret is not the end of a story. It's the very mechanism by which the next chapter gets written more wisely, more humbly, more humanly. An old man sits alone in a quiet room, fingers resting on a worn photograph he never got around to framing. The edges are soft now, the colors fading, but the moment it captured still pulses with meaning. A look, a place, a decision he didn't make, a path he didn't take. He exhales, not in grief, but in something quieter, not quite sorrow, not quite peace, understanding. For years, that picture haunted him, not for what it showed, but for everything it implied. But now, with time softening the edges, he sees it differently, not as a monument to failure, but as a reminder of who he was, and how deeply he tried to live a life that mattered. We carry our regrets like bruises beneath the skin, not always visible, but always felt. They ache when pressed by memory, but they are not wounds of weakness. They are signs that we cared, that we chose, that we felt the weight of being alive in a world that offers more paths than we can ever walk. Regret is not a flaw in the system. Proof the system is working, that we are conscious, that we reflect, that we long to do better. To live without regret is not to live perfectly, is to live unconsciously, to never wrestle with decisions, to never wish we had spoken or stayed or left sooner, is not wisdom, it is detachment. Regret, in its deepest form, is not just about mistakes, it's about love, about meaning, about the ache of knowing we had power, and that power mattered. And perhaps the most human thing we ever do isn't getting everything right. It's standing in the quiet aftermath of a choice we wish we'd made differently, and deciding, despite the ache, despite the outcome, to carry that lesson forward, to be gentler next time, braver, truer, because in the end, perhaps the human thing we ever do is wish we had done better and then try to anyway.